Well, hi there, folks. I'm Dara Star Tucker, and this is The Breakdown. Thank you so much for joining me here on KJLH. I'm excited to be with you for another week of discussions about the issues that matter. You can find me online at the KJLH Instagram page. You can find them at Radio Free KJLH on Instagram. You can find my personal page there on Instagram at Dara Tucker B, and you can find me on all other platforms at Dara Star Tucker. That's Dara with one R and Star with two. Well, I'm excited to get into this week's topic, but before I do, I want to remind you, many of you may know that I am a singer. I am getting on the road in March. I'm going to be doing several dates in the month of March, and I would like to see you out. If you're going to be on the East Coast or in the South, I am doing a show in Nashville, Tennessee on the 17th of March. Of course, that's St. Patrick's Day. Doing that show for the Nashville Jazz Workshop for a series they have called Jazz on the Move. And I'm going to be honoring the wonderful Miss Nancy Wilson that I talked about a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to do a presentation on her life. I'm going to have that discussion. And then me and my band are going to do some music from her repertoire. It's going to be a unique show, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you all. If you're going to be on the East Coast, I would love to see you there. I'm also doing Blues Alley in Washington, D.C. on the 22nd of March. That'll be my second appearance there. That's on a Friday night. And we have two shows, one at 7 and one at 9. So you can go to their website, bluesalley.com, or you can go to my website, darastartucker.com, and find more information about the show. And hopefully I'll see you there if you happen to be in that area. And then later on in the year, in July, I will be playing South in Philly, South Jazz Club in Philly. So if you are a traveling person, I would love to see you at one of these shows. Hopefully I'll be doing some shows in the LA area very, very soon. Well, today's topic is a really important one to me. It's one that I've been talking about a lot online, and I'm going to continue to talk about this year. Of course, we are in election season, and I think it's of the utmost importance that we all be as informed as possible. There is so much going on in the world, and I think for a lot of folks, it can be really easy to hyperfixate on one or two issues that are important to them and just ignore everything else. But I think when we do that, when we hyperfixate on one or two issues because it's all just too much to try to download and understand, I think that's a really easy way to fall prey to some folks that might not have our best interest at heart. Because if you're only focused on one piece of the puzzle and you don't really understand what's going on in a broader sense, you are easier to deceive. It's a lot easier to mislead you and take you down a pathway that maybe is not even in your best interest and certainly is not in the best interest of many people that you love and care about. So we've got to do our best just to take this information in piecemeal. And that's why, months and months before the election, I'm going to be talking about these issues. We're going to take our time and just download this stuff little bit by little bit so that we feel like we are better informed when it's time to start making those bigger decisions down the road. So even now, we should be thinking about whether or not we are registered to vote. Are you registered in your county to vote? Be thinking about those things now so that we're not in a crunch at the last minute trying to figure out what to do and if we have all of our ducks in a row. Start thinking about those things early on, getting organized around the issues, figuring out what it is you care about, being as informed as you can possibly be. And let's remember, it's not all about the presidential election alone. Your local elections have a lot more impact on your day-to-day life than the presidential elections do. So if you can't stomach presidential politics, I hear you, that's fine. Be plugged in and be aware of what is going on locally and understand exactly who you're voting for and why. There is no excuse to unplug and to not be involved at all. At some level, we should all be involved, even if it's just organizing, making sure to grab a family member and help them to get down to the polls. Whatever you can do, there's no excuse to completely unplug. We don't believe in that around here. We believe in being informed and making the best decisions that we can with the information that is available to us in the here and now. And that's what we're going to focus on. So I did a show a couple of weeks ago on something called Project 2025, and that was right as the Super Bowl was airing. So it's possible that some of you may not have heard that episode on Project 2025. If you didn't hear the episode that I did on Project 2025, I would encourage you to go to KJLH's website or get the app and go back into the archives and find the episode just a couple of weeks ago that I did on Project 2025. That's going to be a very important thing to understand going forward, and I'm probably going to be referring to it a lot in these shows where I'm talking about voting issues or anything to do with politics, because this is a huge looming threat on the horizon. If you don't know what Project 2025 is, it is a monstrous proposal of sorts that a group called the Heritage Foundation, along with a bunch of other conservative groups, have come up with It is a proposed set of policies that they are handing off to the next Republican president. Whoever that is, we all know Trump is in line to receive the Republican nomination for president. So this is going to be a proposal that they sit on his desk. Not only that they sit on his desk on day one, that he will have the opportunity to read and contemplate as they did with Reagan. No, this is a plan whose wheels are already turning. They are setting all sorts of things in place so that every part of this plan can be implemented on day one of Trump's presidency. And there's no reason to think that Trump will not be on board with the majority of recommendations in this plan. After all, they were the ones that recommended every single Supreme Court justice that Trump nominated. 5 out of the 6 Catholic judges on the Supreme Court right now were recommendations from either the Federalist Society or the Heritage Foundation. These are 2 very important right-wing political action groups. And the Heritage Foundation is at the head of this Project 2025. They are very influential in Republican politics, in right-wing politics. They have been since Reagan was in office, and they are even more powerful now. So they are organizing some really dastardly things behind the scenes. As I said, if you have not heard that episode that I did on Project 2025, take a moment after this episode is over and go to the website or go to the app and listen to the episode on Project 2025 so you can fully understand what it is that's underway. This is a real and present danger. It is not alarmist, it is truthful, and we all need to be aware and informed. Now, if you haven't figured it out by now, I believe very strongly in studying your quote-unquote enemy's tactics. I don't believe that a lot of these right-wing folks have the best interest of Black folks and of marginalized people at heart. I do not. So one of the first and best things that you can do to guard against the tactics of groups like this is to study how they operate. I tend to be repulsed by a lot of what I perceive to be the viciousness coming out of some of these groups, but I think when we look at them as cartoon villains, it can cause us to shut down and completely turn a blind eye to what's actually going on. And I think that that is the danger, because they are not shutting down and they're not getting weary. They are not going to stop trying to implement Project 2025. If Trump doesn't get into office, it'll just become Project 2029 or whatever they choose to call it. They are going to continue to be vigilant, and we have to as well. So I want to play for you a piece that I did on my TikTok and Instagram channels a little earlier this month, where I talk about MAGA. I talk about understanding and studying this group and not allowing ourselves to be so repulsed by them that we shut them down and we're not listening to them anymore. I think understanding their tactics, understanding what it is that they want, and digging a little deeper into who they are and what their methods are is the best way that we can guard against some of these tactics and strategies. So I'm going to play that piece for you now that I did on the topic of studying MAGA, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to read something for you that is a further exposition on that topic that I think you're going to find really, really interesting. Listen to this and I'll be right back.
Someone in my comments section recently said, well, if we relent to the Democrats and don't push them to move closer to our point of view on certain things, we're just giving our power away. We're giving them power. So we have to withhold our votes and withhold our support so that they know that we have power. And I understand that rationale, I understand that logic, but what I would counter with is, have you studied the MAGA movement? Have you all really studied MAGA? Because I feel like so many of us have spent so much time just being absolutely repulsed by it, till we just sort of shut it out and we judge it. We judge them, but we don't study them. Have you studied them? And how they collude, how they have consolidated power with all of these disparate factions. There are so many varying groups, and we just kind of look at them all as this big amorphous blob. We don't really think of them as factions, but they are. Because you have evangelicals, you have wealthy fat cats, you have people who are from rural parts of the country, and we have working class white folks. You do have a small percentage of Black folks who are aspiring to achieve that American dream. You have immigrants who have this idealized version of the American dream that are in support of the Republican Party. And yeah, you have straight up racists, John Birch Society folks. You got members of the KKK, you got the Proud Boys, you got straight up neo-Nazis. There are a bunch of folks that have somehow managed to work together, to Voltron themselves into this big consolidated blob that is able to achieve what they want. They have figured out that they are stronger combining forces under this MAGA umbrella than they would be attempting to fight against this behemoth Republican Party. Because if you think about it, these MAGA folks really are not really Republicans. This is really supposed to be like a populist movement, the movement that speaks to the common man. We're not about big business. We're not about big politics. We're not about advancing agendas of corporations. We're all about the people. But it's really an ideological movement, ultimately. It's about going back to a particular way of life that they feel existed before all of the other folks started coming in and taking over. I think that's probably a common thread between a lot of those groups. Essentially, America was better before the civil rights movement. But these people ultimately realized that they were stronger together than they would be fighting each other. So then what do you see? You see people like Lindsey Graham, who were these never-Trumpers, who all of a sudden are on the Trump train. They're shaking the pom-poms, they're licking the boots, doing whatever they got to do just to be on the winning team, because they know what it means to win. And everybody's going to get a piece of the pie. If they can get this pie, everybody's going to get their slice. And they know it. We can criticize them for kowtowing, for doing what's expedient, for not having moral courage, all of those things. But they're getting what they want. And they are not imploding. They are not self-destructing. That is not what is happening in the Republican Party. There is a force, there is a MAGA force that has taken over slowly but surely and has consumed that party. And they did it without protesting in the streets. They did it without boycotting anything, nothing that stuck, really. This is a movement of consolidated power. They are behind the scenes, organizing like worker bees, structuring the system to work in their favor, making sure that they're in the position to appoint judges that can make decisions that favor them, running candidates in counties unopposed that can represent them in Congress. They understand what the levers of power actually are. And it's not to say that protests and hashtags and boycotts are not a legitimate form of political action. They are. But when it comes to the kind of political change that wrests control of the levers of government, the things that actually affect our lives, the MAGA wing of the Republican Party has done a masterful job of learning how to wield influence while still remaining a minority faction within their party. And then they got in there and basically acted as a contaminant, and their agenda has spread and has spider-vened out and now is infecting and influencing the rest of the party. There are people who were in Congress 5 or 10 years ago that are not in Congress now that probably still should be in Congress, but they're not there because the MAGA folks drove them out. They are making it untenable for people who don't agree with their ideology to even remain in power. How many senators that opposed Trump are still in Congress now? They've gotten a hold of a concept that I first heard from Hillary Clinton years ago, and she said it does not actually take a majority to affect change. Someone had shown up at one of her rallies, I think a Black Lives Matter protester or something, and they were shouting her down during one of her speeches, and she actually came backstage and she had a conversation with them. And she said, I hear you, I understand what you're saying. I actually agree with what it is that you're protesting about, whatever it was. And she said, the thing that you need to realize is you don't have to get everybody on your side in order to affect change. In order to get what you want, everybody does not have to line up with you and agree with you. You just have to understand how the system works and work with the system to affect the change that you want to see. It does not take a majority of the people to be on your side in order to see your agenda pushed through. Hillary Clinton said that. And now MAGA has taken that principle and they've applied it. We are watching the application of that principle right before our eyes. And we can point out the fact that they lose, people aren't in support of them, the majority of Americans don't agree with them. It doesn't actually matter. Not with the way our system works in this country. For better or for worse, it doesn't matter that the majority of Americans don't line up with their way of thinking. They can still win. And they know that. My question is, do we?
So I think the real takeaway and the real question that comes from that piece is, do we understand our power? Do we understand our power? I think there's a lot of cynicism and a lot of disillusionment that tends to settle in with people who do not have a lot of money and a lot of access and a lot of power. We feel that we don't have the power as just one voter to go up against this machine that is on the right. There are a lot of multimillionaires and billionaires who are fueling these programs that are being proposed on the right. This is not a dog and pony show. These people know what they are doing. And when you realize what you're up against, sometimes it can be very discouraging. I get it. But I think it's really important that we all be imbued with an understanding that we are powerful when we understand what our shared goals are and when we understand that we are stronger together than we are apart. I see a lot of fracturing and a lot of splintering happening on the left, which is understandable considering the issue of the slaughter that's happening right now in Gaza. We can't turn a blind eye to that, and we have no intention of turning a blind eye to it. But it doesn't mean that we aren't dealing with our own issues here on the home front. It doesn't mean that we're not battling this slow creep towards fascism. And we can't lose control of this vehicle because we won't have any power if we do. So we have to juggle and manage a lot of things at one time. And this goes back to the issue I talked about earlier of not being so hyper-focused on one issue that you lose control in all of these other areas. And that's a hard reality to grapple with, especially for younger voters, but it is our reality. Now, I've been doing a lot of political commentary, particularly this month, and I will be going forward for the rest of the year on my social media channels. And someone asked me, well, what happens if these folks don't get in? Do we see another January 6th? So in other words, if we repeat the same scenario from 2020 and they don't get the result that they want, are we going to see folks scaling the Capitol wall all over again, bringing zip ties? Are we going to have a rerun of January 6th? And my answer is no. I don't think these folks are going to try to do the same thing in the exact same way. What January 6th, 2021 was a practice run. They were testing the bounds of the system and they were seeing where it was vulnerable. And surprise, surprise, there are a lot of vulnerabilities within our system, a surprising number of vulnerabilities within our political system and ways in which they can get behind the scenes and turn the knobs and turn the dials and figure out a way to maintain power, even though they don't have the support of the majority of the American public. And I told this person, Mike Johnson, who is now the Republican Speaker of the House, he was an unknown guy. He was pretty much a nobody. And all of a sudden he gets pulled up to be the leader of the party, the Speaker of the House. And why was this insignificant person that supposedly no one knew appointed to be Speaker of the House? Well, it turns out that Mike Johnson was strategic in coordinating the legislative and legal efforts behind the scenes to keep Donald Trump in office. What we saw happen on January 6th was essentially the dog and pony show. It was the tip of the iceberg. The real truth of what was going on was underneath the water. So those folks that ended up at the Capitol on January 6th, they ended up being the fall guys for some folks who were a lot smarter and who were a lot sneakier about what they were doing. They were working behind the scenes to initiate challenges to the election results in court. Mike Johnson himself was involved in coordinating all of those members of the House that voted not to certify the election. He was the one that organized those people to do that. That is the primary reason that Mike Johnson has the position as Speaker of the House today. So I want to read you an article by a man named Thom Hartmann. Now, Thom Hartmann has written for the New York Times, among many other publications. He's a well-respected journalist and he writes independently as well. So I want to read you something from his blog called The Hartmann Report. He released what he feels is going to be the Republicans' plan going forward should the election results not favor them. Now, Thom Hartmann wrote an article before January 6th, 2021 even happened, saying that something like January 6th could happen. And people called him alarmist. They really didn't believe him. But now this guy's got the ear of a lot of folks because he already knew what they were capable of. So I'm going to read you this new article that he's written about what he feels is the game plan with Republicans going forward. When I published the article 10 months before January 6th, I received concerned and even alarmed communications from several Democratic strategists and a few elected officials who basically said they didn't think there was any way Trump could try such an audacious move. And if he did, he wouldn't get away with it. But I was right, and that was exactly what Trump had up his sleeve. We saw it play out on January 6th. The only thing that stopped him was Pence's unwillingness to go along with stealing the election. Now I'm hearing a news story from those same GOP insiders as well as other commentators about Trump's schemes for 2024. Here's what I'm hearing Republicans are planning in the event that Joe Biden wins re-election and Democrats hold the Senate and take the House this November. First, Republicans need to make sure that they're in control of the House of Representatives on January 6, 2025, when the new president will be certified. To do that, even though Democrats might have won enough seats to take back the House in the 2024 election, Speaker Johnson will refuse to swear into Congress on January 3rd a handful of those Democrats, claiming there are irregularities in their elections that must be first investigated. Consider that Johnson is still refusing to swear in Tom Suozzi, who recently won George Santos's old seat, something that Johnson apparently did to maintain enough Republican majority votes to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas. Johnson says they'll swear him in this coming Thursday, but nobody's holding their breath. Like Mitch McConnell withholding Merrick Garland's nomination to the Supreme Court for over a year, withholding certification of a handful of Democrats would be easy, legal, and completely immoral. There's nothing Democrats can legally do to stop Speaker Johnson from pulling this off. He can postpone swearing in a member of Congress for as long as he wants. That keeps Speaker Mike Johnson in charge of the House, so they can also refuse to accept the Electoral College certifications of election from a handful of states where they claim there are problems. Keep in mind, Johnson was the guy who organized the wave of 138 House members who voted not to certify Joe Biden's election in January of 2020. That's why Trump wanted him as Speaker. Elise Stefanik, the number 3 person in House Republican leadership, has already refused to say whether she'd vote to certify the presidential election results in November. Others, like Kentucky Republican Congressman Thomas Mace, are repeatedly mentioning their belief that the House gets to decide who's president, not the people or even the Electoral College. As Mace posted on X, Maine, Colorado, and other states that might try to bureaucratically deny ballot access to any Republican nominee should remember the U.S. House of Representatives is the ultimate arbiter of whether to certify electors from those states. In response, Elon Musk posted a one-word comment: interesting. Then, regardless of how many votes Biden won by, electoral or popular, the House simply refuses to certify the Electoral College votes of enough states that the minimum of 270 is not reached. Under the 12th Amendment, like with the election of 1876, that throws the election into the House, where each state has one vote. While a majority of Americans live in a state run by Democrats, a majority of the states themselves are run by Republicans. Each state gets one vote for president in the House, and right now 26 state delegations are GOP controlled, meaning that a majority of the House would simply vote to put Trump back into the White House, 26-23. Pennsylvania's delegation is 50-50, all totally legal. The Trump caucus in the House, led by Speaker Johnson, has largely given up on democracy when elections don't give them power. As outrageous as this scenario sounds, they justify it to themselves as being essential to save America from woke Democrats. Johnson has repeatedly said that he thinks God himself put Johnson into the speakership to fulfill some great destiny, comparing himself with Moses. Stealing a presidential race for the greater good almost certainly qualifies as that. And although Congress in 2022 raised the number of congressional objectors necessary to stop the certification of a presidential vote, Johnson himself was able to round up more than that number in 2020. This is eminently doable. Finally, the Supreme Court long ago ruled that they and the entire U.S. court system have no jurisdiction over political issues that the Constitution says must be resolved by Congress. The issue of Congress's certification of Electoral College votes certainly qualifies, so no matter what the courts might want to say or do, there's probably no legal tool that they can use to block a second Trump presidency under these circumstances. In one fell swoop, they'll take back the government, putting an end to that pesky problem of democracy and voters wanting nice things. President Trump issues a new Schedule F executive order, and suddenly 20,000 or so of the top management of every federal agency find themselves out of a job, being replaced by conservative ideologues who are being vetted by Heritage and other conservative think tanks as you're reading these words. Once they have control over both the political and the deep state or administrative government, these conservatives intend to set about making the changes that they've been pushing for years. End gay marriage and criminalize being trans, outlaw abortion and most forms of birth control, end the teaching of Black history, Outlaw DEI and affirmative action of any sort. Shut down most functions of the EPA so the fossil fuel and chemical industries can do whatever they want to our air and water. End enforcement of our anti-monopoly laws. Fire thousands of IRS investigators to make America safe for morbidly rich tax cheats. Shut down all green initiatives and instead drill, baby, drill. Sell off public lands and parks to the highest bidders. Privatize Social Security and end traditional Medicare. End federal funding for public schools and colleges. Outlaw unions. It's truly heartbreaking. They're committed to abandoning America's historic embrace of democracy, the radical new form of government that our nation's founders brought back into the world after it had vanished for almost 3,000 years. But as Americans have figured out the GOP's priorities are disguised by their obsessions to great wealth and Vladimir Putin, Republicans have decided that winning free and fair election is for suckers. Stealing them is so much easier. I don't see any legal way in which such a strategy can be stopped because it's all based on legal technicalities. Like the legal technicality that George W. Bush and Donald Trump both lost the national popular vote but became president anyway without significant protest from the American people. When I wrote that article laying out Trump's plan to have phony electors et al. Back in 2020, people were upset that I was giving him ideas. Some may say about this article, don't tell them how to do it. But this has already been written about extensively by Newsweek's editor-at-large Tom Rogers, Mark Medish, and Joel McCleary for the Washington Spectator, and covered last Friday night in an opening monologue by Joy Reid. It's public knowledge, although the media seems unwilling to discuss it. The best way to prevent this from happening is to widely publicize their scheme so public opinion will become so intense that they fear the consequences. It's a thin thread holding our republic together, but at least it's something. Pass it along. So Tom Hartman paints a pretty bleak picture if you think about it. He's saying there's actually nothing that will legally stop them from being able to do this. The only thing he says that could stop them is just the fact that so many people are aware that they are planning to do it. And maybe that fact in and of itself would cause them to pump the brakes because they know there would be dire consequences if they did. But this is why I continue to use language like keep your hands on the wheel. Don't allow yourself to be sidetracked. Don't allow yourself to become hyper-focused on one or two issues where you are not paying attention to what your enemy is doing. They are interested in dominance. They are interested in Christian nationalism. All of the same things that this country was founded on is what this group of people wants to perpetuate. And I am in no way saying that someone who has right-leaning views or someone who is fiscally conservative necessarily falls into this camp. But this new breed of MAGA Republicans, which are not really new, they're as old as dirt, but they have been newly emboldened by Trump and his message. This particular group of people, they are gathering more adherents and they are ready to take these people off of a cliff with them. And half of the folks supporting this movement would not benefit from most of the things that they are proposing. Most of these Make America Great Again folks, they're hyper-focused on one or two issues. They keep those people hyper-focused on culture wars. If you bring up trans people in bathrooms, if you bring up trans athletes, if you bring up abortion, you really don't have to say much more, and they're in hook, line, and sinker. We have to be smarter than that. We have to understand that there are myriad issues that impact our lives on a daily basis. And we've also got to understand how this group operates. They are well organized, they are well funded, and they are relentless. They are not giving up, and we shouldn't either. Now, again, if you have not heard my episode on Project 2025, I would encourage you to go to the KJLH website or go to the KJLH app and listen to that episode on Project 2025. It is extremely important that you be aware of what that program entails. That's my time for today. I'm Dara Star Tucker. Let's keep up this conversation on the KJLH Instagram page. Go to Radio Free KJLH on Instagram. Meet me there and let's continue to talk about the issues that matter. You can also find me on my personal Instagram page at Dara Tucker B and everywhere else at Dara Star Tucker. That's Dara with one R and Star with two. Remember, I'm getting on the road. I will be in Nashville on the 17th of March. I will be in DC on the 22nd of March. I will be in Philly on the 21st of July. Thank you so much for joining me for the breakdown here on KJLH. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. And until then, let's learn to shout.